Hello, as I was introduced, I'm the data editor for the Times and Sunday Times in London, and we just wanted to do a quick introduction about our team there. About 2 years ago, our team was set up as an investigative computational journalism unit. It's quite new in its area. We have a statistician on staff who is a PhD in machine learning and data mining. We have programmers and journalists working together, and we basically try to investigate stories through data. And that's basically our expertise, and that's where we're coming from. And I think what we're talking about today is obviously a huge rise in data journalism. Although most of us would probably agree data journalism is nothing new. It's been around for ages. We've been making sense of data for a very long time. I think what we're trying to do at the Times is sort of reinvent what it means to be a data journalist. It's quite sexy at the moment. I never thought I would say data and sexy in the same sentence, but I think it's getting to that point where there's so many news organizations that are really trying to jazz all of that up. So what we are trying to do instead is to really dig into data using something that humans probably could never do by hand, that only computers can. So what I want to talk to you about is a little bit of what we did during the election. And I think, as I just said, what we're doing is quite different, and what we're doing is something interrogative. And what we started out with was some really basic analysis. We started looking at what was coming through. When there was tons of polling data, there was data coming from all over the place. I'm not going to go into the flaws of polling data. I think you've heard a bit about that, and you're going to hear a bit later. But at the beginning, there were a lot of polls coming in, and we were not confident enough to take that polling and project it down to seat level constituencies. So we had to rethink what that meant. And I think this is the main message that I want to bring to you today is that no matter what the future of big data in politics, in policy, in academia, in journalism, I think we have to be really investigative with it, and we have to be very ethnically interrogative. So I think for us, we just said, what can we do? We knew we had enough data to look at parties as a whole, and we knew we had enough data to look at larger groups like gender, et cetera. So what we did here was just quite simple. We just said, well, we know we can look at where everyone's polling at the moment. So this story that you see up on the screen came out 6 months ahead of the election. And we know where people were voting before, and we know where they're looking to vote now. Why don't we take a look at what that means? There's 6 models running in the back of that, and as you can see, we just showed simply the flow and the real exodus in the Lib Dems in this case of where the data is going. So we took a Sinky graph. This is one of the great advantages of having academia on your team. This graph that you see up here is called a Sinky graph. It's used in engineering and modeling. And we just took it and said, how can we show the flow of this data? This is where I think visualization comes into a big play here. But as you can see with the Lib Dems, the smaller one on the left-hand side, this, I think, for the first time showed the actual data exodus of the Lib Dems. We knew they were leaving because of education rehaul, but this was actually showing that. And it was really important to us because this type of model and these graphs started being floated all over the place. My friend over at The Guardian started using it for their prediction model. Ipsos Mori started using these Sinky graphs, and we're starting to see this sort of academic charts being floated around journalism, which was quite exciting. We went a bit further then and started saying, okay, we still are not confident enough to do that, so we need to dig a bit further. We created this thing called the voter profiler, and what you see up there is we took demographic data and we just looked at what are the factors behind people who say they intend to vote one way or another. And what you see right there at the bottom are the different percentages and factors of people who wanted to vote conservative, and that came down to sort of issues like the economy, being homeowners, things that you would probably quite expect, but we gave that to our readers and allowed to play with demographic data. This was our first step into finding stories and to thinking about how can we not use polling data, how can we investigate something quite different. And what finally came to our last point at the very end was we're doing a lot of smaller stories, investigating and using this demographic data, but ultimately at the very end we had to say how we cannot use it. I had a lot of pressure from my editors saying The Guardian, The New Statesman, everyone's using these great projection level interactives, why can't you? And we held to our ground and we said the data wasn't strong enough. So we had to reinvent it. And like I said from the beginning, I think this is going to be increasingly important in policy, journalism, academia, is how do we trust data? How do we take data we trust, and how do we take public data and still find meaningful insight? So for us here, it was very, very simple. We just said, what do we trust? We trust the labor force survey, we trust the census, we trust a series of demographic information that we've been using all year, and we knew the results on the night we trust. So using that, we sat and thought, how can we tell the election? And we started thinking about classification trees or decision trees, which some of you probably know here. Very simple machine learning technique that just looks down and says, what are the factors that are indicating why something is going one way or the other? We ran it with the polling data to find out how that separates. And we had it all ready to run on the night. It took us a half hour to create this analysis. This was revolutionary for us, mainly because what our goal, as I said, is to be computational journalists, to be doing a type of journalism that only a machine or a computer can do. As you know, the Times is really well known for our analysts, for our columnists who dissect the news and politics. But what was quite great for us in this sense is we were able to produce this analysis before even our greatest political commentators could do that. Within a half hour of the election being called, we said how many constituencies went conservative because they had lower levels on council housing, how many of them were influenced because of unemployment. And we were able to bring these down, these quick little decision trees, and that was massively powerful for us. It told a really interesting part of the election, something that nobody else did. And I just again, presenting all this through because it is, I think, increasingly important as we move forward with big data to do that. As more data sets are being open, as local election results start to be open, as more data is being put into the hands of the public, we can keep doing all this. All the analysis that you have seen that I've just shown you today is all through public data. And I think if we can increase that public data and we can increase the information that's out there, more and more analysis like this can be done. And that's ultimately my final message.